Hey everybody, so in this lesson we're going to be picking up where we left off in the last one and building our scatterplot app, and we're going to be focusing on the server function. The server function is where all the calculations for our app occur, and this is where, you know, the sausage is made, so to speak. This is what produces the output that the user is going to see or experience. All right, and a lot of this code is going to look familiar to you. We're going to be using ggplot to produce a scatter plot, but the main difference is that the inputs for the scatter plot are going to be dynamically retrieved from the user input, from the UI. So when the user selects a new variable, that is going to be input into the ggplot code, basically. That's the main difference in what we're doing here in the server function relative to what we've done before, is this element of interactivity, of reactivity, more specifically. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we want to do here is define the server logic required to draw a scatter plot. And we have to have an object called server, and then function. And in function we have three arguments we have two arguments that are required: input and output. There's this third argument, session. This is an optional parameter that controls the behavior of the app during the user session. We're not going to get into that here, but I'm just putting it here because this is our first app, and I want you to know that that is an optional parameter that you may want to dig into in the future. Okay, so next we're going to write the code to render the plot. All right, so let's type render the plot. All right, and here we're going to define output scatter plot. All right, and that is going to be our object, right, which we're storing an output, that this element of the UI code is going to be looking for. Remember, we talked about that in the last video, scatter plot. So we have plot output, scatter plot, and so plot output in our main panel is going to be looking for the scatter plot object to dynamically update in the UI, you know, as the user selects different variables. Okay, so output scatter plot. All right, and then we're going to call render plot. All right, and then so we need parentheses and then we need brackets. Okay, and this is where our ggplot code is gonna go. All right, so here we're gonna put our ggplot call. All right, and we're gonna call ggplot, and we're gonna use the dem data that we read in earlier from the CSV file. So that's gonna be the data that we're gonna use for this plot. All right, and for our aesthetic, we're going to, for AES call, we're going to define X as, and this is a little bit particular. So basically what we have here is the user is going to be selecting the names of these variables, and they're going to be sent as text to the server function. All right, and basically the way that ggplot works is it operates with non-standard evaluation, which means that you don't have to quote the variable in the AES call that you want to display on the X or the Y axis, and it's set up that way for convenience, right? You can just type the variable name and it knows that's a column name, so you don't have to put the quotation marks around it. But in this case, we're not actually getting the raw column name. We are getting text from the user, so we have to convert that to essentially what ggplot will understand as a column name. All right, so to do that, we're going to use the get function. All right, and the get function is going to convert our text into the raw column name, more or less. All right, so AES x equals get, and here we need to call input xcall, right? Input xcall, and that comes from our UI up here, the user selection from that first drop-down element, which we defined as, you'll remember, xcall. We said we're going to call that xcall and refer to it as xcall in the server function. All right, so we're calling that there, and then we need to do the same thing for the y-axis. We're going to use get input $ycall. All right, and then we can add our other elements of the ggplot. So this is going to be geom, since it's scatter point, we're going to use geom point. All right, and we're going to find the color as region, and that's not a user input or anything, so that's going to come straight from the data, so we don't have to do anything special there. So color equals region. We're going to add a low S curve, so geom smooth method equals low S. All right, and then we're going to add a Viridis color scheme for the region's colors, and that is a discrete variable, so D, so underscore D, option equals plasma, or whatever scheme you think looks good, and then we're going to use the minimal theme, which is nice and clean. I always like that one. And for labels, this is a little tricky too, because our X and Y axis labels are going to change each time the user selects new input, right? So we have to have some special code here as well. So we're going to do X equals names. We're going to be working with here essentially our variable list, vars, and we want to take the names for each of the elements of this list when they're selected, right? Or elements of this vector, more specifically. So X equals names, vars, okay, so that's our list of variables, and then we're going to subset it. And we're going to use the which function, which is going to return the index number of the element of the list that is selected. All right, and then that's going to basically, well, let me finish the code here. So which vars equals input, the user selected input for X, basically xcall. Okay, so it's going to, so this is going to extract the index number of the element that the user selects, the index number in this list. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, and that's going to be used to subset this list. And then finally, names is going to pull the name of the element that is selected. All right. So each time the user selects new input, this is going to change. All right, we're going to do the same thing with the y-axis. So names, vars, which, vars equal input, but this time we want the y column. All right. And then let's also add captions. So we have X, Y. A caption equals, and we'll say source V-Dem Institute, and then color equals region, so that our legend says region with a capital R. All right. And that is basically it, should be basically it for the server function. Okay, so just to repeat what's going to happen here. Okay, so this is our server function here. This is the entire server function. And so we're going to be defining output, that we're calling scatter plot. And then we're calling the render plot function, because this is the plot that we want to ultimately render up here in the plot output. And this tells it that we want, this is a reactive function, right? So render plot is a reactive function for building a plot. And it's going to basically be watching for changes from the user input. And we're defining a ggplot object, which is a scatter plot, and it's going to dynamically change what is displayed on the x and the y axis depending on the user input. Input for the x-axis and input for the y-axis based on the two drop-down menus that we defined in the user interface. And then also we're going to change the axis labels for the x-axis and the y-axis in a similar way. Okay. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to display the app. All right. And so that's the last part of it. So basically we're going to say run the application, and ultimately if we want other people to see this we need to serve it somewhere, but we're not going to focus on that now. We're just going to run this locally because it's our first app, so our first couple apps. We're just going to focus on viewing them locally. So UI equals UI and server equals server. So this says, display the app shiny, and the UI is the UI and the server is the server. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. Oh, let's save it, which we haven't done. That was kind of dangerous, but okay, let's save it. And let's go ahead and run the app. And voila, it worked the first time. How about that? Okay, so let's go ahead and just make sure everything's working here. We'll change the variables. Okay, there we see life expectancy now on the y-axis, and the name is changing just like we expected. Education. And if we want, we can choose different variables for the x-axis. And yep, everything is running.